Hello and welcome to Monarchist Minute. I am Vice Chancellor Clemens Magnolia, and I have with me some of my very good friends. We have one of our former counselors here. We got Victor. We have some of our new guests, Frederick,
Yay.
Water Cube,
Hello.
and the most lovable of them all, Old Man Mammoth.
Wait, I'm allowed to be here?
That's why we love him.
All right, so up first, Mike Pence has announced that he has dropped out of the presidential race. This was a very sad moment for all 10 of his supporters.
Yeah, sadly.
But
But the way his campaign was going, he wouldn't have a chance against the other opponents the way he was going with his campaign. But maybe next time, Mike.
I'm not sure if there's going to be a next time because look at it. Mike Pence has a proven conservative track record, but he didn't make it to Iowa because of where the GOP is going right now. It doesn't matter what he has done, it matters where the GOP is going. And the GOP is going really hard towards Trump right now.
Yeah, they're going more towards like, okay, Trump is our only option because the people love him, and you can't change the crowd because Trump he is the man of the crowd. So yeah.
Well, also one thing is it's also Republicans closing rank around Trump because of what happened around January 6th, the indictment for trying to overturn the election, among other things. Like, this is them clearly closing ranks, closing out anyone else who, unless they explicitly are endorsed by Trump or try to mimic him in the best way possible, they're going to exclude them from it just to show that level of solidarity as a political organization.
And let's actually talk about the indictments that
Trump is facing.
President Trump is facing. He has gotten the book thrown at him, court appearances up and down the country. He has had allies like Sidney Powell turn on him. It is not a good, despite the party closing ranks around Trump, you've got to feel that this is not a good time to be a member of the Trump clan right now.
But also, since he's being indicted left and right, from the polls, it looks like he's getting very good polls from that. Because he's being shown as this is like, a thing of justice.
He's being perceived as a political martyr by the right because they see these indictments as being politically motivated indictments by the left wing of this country in order to attempt to silence President Trump.
Yeah, the gag order.
Gag orders are very common in legal
things, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's some standard.
There's nothing special about a gag order. However, there is something special when the guy that's under the gag order appears to have broken the gag order within hours of it being imposed on him. Now, you can argue that the terms of a gag order are unjust or whatnot. I'm not going to make any sort of argument here for or against. But, I mean, to see to see the Republican Party just full on embrace Trump, at this point, his prophecy could come true in that he very well could shoot a guy in broad daylight on Fifth Avenue and still be the Republican nominee for president.
Yeah.
They need him more than he needs them. That tends to be the case with this. Like, he's such a populist president or was a populist president, even with the indictments, all that. Like, straight up, like what you mentioned, like ignoring the gag order. He can flaunt in front of the law. It doesn't matter if the law is just or not. He can go against those institutions without really much fear of recourse because of how popular he was among certain crowds.
Yeah.
And his popularity is only growing too. I mean, there was have you guys seen the video of that rap concert where the guy started was it a "We Want Trump" chant or something along those lines at a rap concert?
Oh my. Yes, the Trump hype is back for, I guess, the rap community, I guess you
Well,
could say.
I
Because
don't
he
know what it.
he got mugshotted by people in Georgia, so
Well, I
yeah,
think the mugshot was probably the biggest mistake that the left could have made because
yeah,
it gave the right an image that they can plaster all over the walls, etc., to show this is a guy that is, according to them, being politically persecuted for his crimes, as we welcome in William Stout to the audience, to the
yes,
podcast.
Good evening,
Chaplain Strout
everyone.
is
What
here.
have I missed?
We were just talking about Mike Pence dropping out of a race and talking about just the GOP race in general.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see.
Well, what's your thought about this, Chaplain Strout?
Honestly, I haven't been really informed about it. I honestly haven't been following the primaries as closely as I would like. And I know I probably should, but I've been under the impression for a while that we're just going to get Trump-Biden 2.0 race again, and I
Yeah,
haven't really put much
it looks
energy or
like
thought into it.
it looks like that unless the Democrats decide to come up with an idea to get rid of Biden, because you've seen
Honestly,
his polls, it's not very good, especially among independents who don't like him anymore.
Most of the
honestly,
moderate left,
Ohio has open primaries. I might get a Republican ballot and vote DeSantis just to try and shake it up, just to do my part.
Maybe.
Like
like
I have mixed feelings
But
about DeSantis, but he
Water
is
Cube,
so much more confident than Trump.
right.
Water Cube, you're trying to make a point.
I was gonna say I actually forgot it right when I don't remember now. Never mind.
Write it down. Next time you get a point, write it down so that you can remember it later. That is basically what we've had to do for previous episodes of Monarchist Minute. But
Yeah.
let's actually take a tiny bit of a pivot here and talk about RFK announcing an independent run rather than a Democrat run. I don't think that people are trying to tell me that this is going to be Ross Perot 2.0. RFK is not going to have the same momentum as a Ross Perot or anything along those lines. He has the Kennedy name recognition, I know, but I don't think he's going to make as much of a dent because our country is so polarized right now and they can't really get anything done. Hey, maybe might be why we might need a monarchy moving forward. Imagine that.
But the sad thing about it, though,
idea.
is so this is a prediction that I believe could happen, or very well could happen, in the next election. And it scares me because of the political polarization of this country.
Spit it out.
We could be going down the road of political civil war.
No,
or
civil
at
war won't
least
really happen in the United States. We've been going through something equivalent of a years of lead, that what happened in Italy during the Cold War for the last 20, 30 years now, since like the Oklahoma City bombing. It was going to be a civil war, we're already there. We're just have a stable enough institutions for us to rely on and actively engage with as we need to.
Yeah, but if no, I'm not
If
with
I may,
the
if I
Trump
may
crowd.
provide a
I'm not with the Trump crowd, but if Biden wins, I already know there's gonna be some guns coming out, because there's no way he could have won because of his polls. And
I'm going
but
to push back a little. I'm going to push back a little bit here and say that the Trump crowd were ready for civil war in 2020. However, all they were waiting on was an order from Trump, which of course never came.
because he ordered that, during his speech at the Capitol, for a protest to be peaceful, which we already saw it wasn't peaceful during that.
Wait, it
one
wasn't
portion.
peaceful?
He demanded that it must be peaceful, but the crowd
He's
couldn't
referring to
really.
January 6th.
Yeah. J6 was a very bad situation
When
for
Trump said we're gonna march peacefully to the Capitol, and we're gonna make sure they know what we think about what they're doing to our country, and it's terrible. It's horrible. We gotta fix it.
As a former co-host of this podcast once said, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Charles York, actually. Anybody listening can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Charles York who said, if this is what counts as an insurrection, I want my money back.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that was.
He was.
Charles
Yeah, I
York.
remember when he said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, and
If this is an insurrection, I want my money back.
And I think I'm gonna go on my own little rant. I think I've done this rant. In fact, I think I did this rant last week. I just find the entire situation with January 6th absurd. Like, you basically kick in the door of the federal government, hold the building where all of it happens hostage, and then you voluntarily leave without enforcing any demands. Way to tease the entire country.
Well, a lot of that can also just be poor organization, not even just waiting on the order, because there's people who are ready to act independently.
Yeah.
There has to be one, like in any crowd of radicals, doesn't matter what like kind of group you are, there's going to be one lone wolf. That tends to be the rule of thumb. And people were probably ready to act, but they just didn't have any planning.
What the Trump crowd had pointed out is that, what was that one guy that they said was a Fed who tried to encourage the crowd?
Ray Apps.
Yeah, Ray Apps. And he whispered in that guy's ear, and then immediately a charge happens.
So, I have not listened to last week's episode, but did we talk about the ongoing conflict in Israel?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
did
did.
cover that.
We did.
Although we do have
we
new
should have.
developments, such as the
Yes.
U.S. bombing an Iranian base in Syria. So, ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing if they do the draft?
I don't have to do anything because I can't be drafted, but they're not gonna draft us again. It didn't work in Vietnam. It ain't gonna work now.
A professional army always operates better than a conscript army. Drafts just raise, like, it makes people think about the war more because their sons and daughters are being drafted to go off compared to someone volunteering.
I'm sure while you're all fighting, I will do my best to keep up the home front.
Well, I'll be keeping up the home front with you, ma'am, if I can't be drafted.
Never say die, son.
Me?
I actually, let me DM you.
Well,
Oh, boy.
me. Well, me.
I got too many
I
pre-existing
could get
conditions.
drafted because I am in my 20s still. And,
Just say you have depression. They can't give you a gun then. Like that's literally one of the disqualifiers now is the depression. Like because it makes sense.
And
You know,
if they were going to reinstate the draft, they would have loosened the restrictions on who can be drafted.
yeah, because if you've seen statistics, lots of Americans are fat, underweight, and they can't really perform well in the field.
Wait, did you just say underweight?
yeah, there's
I
a
think you
mixture
meant
of
to say overweight.
no. There's overweight and malnourished.
Overweight. I said overweight.
No, you said underweight. I heard you say
What?
underweight.
Well, I
That's
may have
weird.
said it wrong because I can do that sometimes.
Anyway, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm gonna pull a little trick that an old substitute teacher of mine did to get out of the Vietnam War draft. What they did was they signed up for the Air Force, and they spent the entirety of the Vietnam War as a flight mechanic. So I'm either gonna go into the Air Force and get some kind of flight mechanic job, because I don't know if they're gonna let me fly a plane with how poor my eyesight is.
Oh yeah, they
Now-
won't.
Now, they might exempt you if you're working in like a arms manufacturing factory that's producing arms for the military.
We're doing
I don't.
hypotheticals for
I
a
work
situation
for
that's not going to
Whirlpool.
happen.
I build dryers.
You'll all be fine.
if
probably.
there is a draft, if there is a draft, they might shift your Whirlpool factory to an arms making factory.
Yeah,
That could be interesting.
but I am not.
They
a
did
fac-
it in World War II.
But the problem with me is I'm not a factory worker. I'm a truck driver, so I could be hauling arms in for them.
You're the first
But-
person to be conscripted if there's a conscription or
They're
draft.
gonna conscript you, hand you the keys to a deuce and a half, and say, "Go crazy."
They always want
Congratulations,
logistics.
you are the logistics.
Like you're what like soldiers after they leave the military after doing like a career in logistics become already. So you already reached the end stage of the military career for like the enlisted or NCO.
Right.
And of course, I must make mention here that there's an argument to be made, and okay, I completely understand why the DoD did that. Out of retaliation, of course, that's going to happen. However, I'm going to say something that may or may not be very popular. I'm going to essentially say that
Mhm.
the United States should not have had people. I'm going to take the position as basically devil's advocate and say the U.S. There's an argument to be made for the U.S. should not have even had people over there in the first place to be killed.
Mhm.
Of course.
But
No
but
one's gonna be-
mainly it was because of the military-industrial
Well, yeah, but like that's
complex.
why people were over there to begin with, and we shouldn't have the military-industrial complex ideally. But
Yeah,
like a lot of it
course.
has to do with American economic interests in the region, especially like how Israel and Saudi Arabia are now finally somewhat getting along in relation to the Iranian-Saudi
I
Cold
think that
War.
was because of China.
Less
I
to do with
actually
China.
think I actually whisper quietly, but I actually give credit to Trump for that.
Oh yeah, no, Trump did definitely reaffirm our relationships with in the Middle East, like a lot more
Yeah.
successfully than like people tend to give him credit for, but at the same time, we shouldn't really be in the Middle East diplomatically to have like huge obligations in that region.
Right. We definitely
But-
need to downsize our presence out there.
Yeah, And this is what I mean. We gotta get out of there, like, entirely. But but if another, like, ISIS threat comes around, then it's possible we could have some people there for, like, helping the native armies over there, maybe, but not like
We tried that with
anything too
ISIS, and the State Department and the Department of Defense, not State Department, it was like two different parts. DHS and Department of Defense funded two different guys, or the CIA, or basically, we don't know who to back in those wars geopolitically half the time. And even if it's just
Yeah,
against
like
ISIS, trying to
Syria.
help the foreign armies or the armies that are native to that area, for the most part, tends to not play out because they become reliant on us. Because we tend to just do anything ourselves, and we tend to set up our stuff separately because we use. I'm trying to remember exactly what the issue was when it came down to training the Iraqi army, the new Iraqi army.
Well, it wasn't even down to training, it was down to the mindset of the Iraqi people, because as soon as we pulled out, ISIS just absolutely steamrolled.
And it
Oh,
just
yeah.
You
comes
don't
down to
you
the
don't
fact.
get that sort of so we put out excuse me, that was Afghanistan, not Iraq, pardon me. But as soon as we pulled out of Afghanistan, the Taliban swooped right back in. Like, it's not like, sometimes the people that we are trying to westernize simply don't want to be westernized.
Another big thing that happened in Afghanistan was with when we pulled out, we also pulled out all the logistics providers, and that basically ended up crippling the new Afghani army because they couldn't get man and materials out to fight the
Yeah.
Taliban.
Yeah, and plus the part that most people overlook is because they didn't want to fight, really.
It was okay.
'Cause-
Like, with the situation in Afghanistan, it wasn't a lack of will to fight. It's just the Taliban found its strength in unifying the different clans of the area and different tribal groups in the area. They found
because
that
I believe-
unification through Islam, compared to the democratic government, which, much like most post-colonial governments, when they have this still strong tribal identity, get immediately filled with corruption in relation to that tribal identity.
Mhm.
Imagine that. You can't just take a Western liberal democracy and put it anywhere and expect it to work.
And as someone mentioned to me earlier this week, and I quote, if we're going to get involved, we should change the borders. I don't think that's realistic. If anything, if we actually go to war, a hot war, and we capitulate Iran, we've got to have the Shah restored.
About the topic of Afghanistan, you know all those weapons and shit we left behind for them to take? Well, it's rumored that all those weapons are being sold to Hamas.
No. Oh, like, Hamas and Taliban have connections, but Taliban values them a lot, those weapons a lot more, for solidifying their rule compared to sending them off to another organization to help them out.
Also, how would they even ship them all the way over to Palestine without getting caught?
Like, the Iranians try it all the time,
yeah.
and the Israelis just intercept their ships.
I thought the rumor was that those weapons were being sold for the Russo-Ukrainian side.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
it's like one of those things where, like, there's a stockpile of weapons and anyone can really say anything that's happened to it. It's like the rumors about, just a nuke in the black market in Bulgaria or something like that. Which is like one
Whatever.
verifiable case. Probably some of those weapons got sold to Russia. Some of those weapons probably did get sold to Hamas, but not all of them, and not really probably in that massive amounts. Probably, I guess, man-portable air defense sort of stuff, or stuff that's like harder to come across that would be a major donation to both of those things as a sign of goodwill. Especially with Afghanistan to Iran, because didn't they have like a border skirmish like a couple months back?
I think they did.
And since you guys did bring up the idea of Afghanistan and the idea of a liberal democracy not working in certain areas, I believe at one point Afghanistan had its own monarchy.
It
They did.
did.
before.
They
Yeah.
did, however, President Bush refused to restore it.
Yeah, big mistake. Because
Huge
I think
mistake.
Like,
What can we expect from the neoconservative himself? The gun-toting, liberal democracy loving,
you ever hear about what he tried to
crusader
pull
of
in Iraq
freedom.
with
Iraq,
like putting
Yeah.
in credit cards first before they even had the technology to have the readers for them? They didn't even have the readers.
Good.
So they tried setting up credit cards for Iraqi citizens. They banned all Ba'ath Party members from holding any government office, which means all the teachers can no longer return to their job because they lived in a party state. You had to be a member of the party to do stuff. And what else was it? They expected the military just to, return to working as the military when they just went home or joined a radical group like ISIS or some of the other groups I'm trying to remember, like
Big
neo-Ba'athist
thing
extremists.
The big
What-
thing in Iraq is that we overcompensated and we got rid of the
Gun
Ba'ath Party that
It's
is
more-
Sunni dominated, and then
Yeah, they
immediately,
did that.
and then we immediately packed the
Yeah.
government with Shias, which obviously infuriated the Sunnis.
Yeah. They shouldn't have done that. What they should have done was reform the Baptist Party into where it could be, a party of democracy.
Well, here's the issue with the
Instead
Ba'ath
of,
Party ideology. With
you
the
know,
Iraqi-dominated faction of the Ba'ath
change up
Party,
some of its
Fred
policies and
Waterkeep
that
was
kind of
trying to make
stuff.
a point.
like the Iraqi Ba'ath Party, specifically that branch, was already so muddled in weird forms of ethnic extremism around Arab, nationalism, compared to even I think at the time the Syria Ba'athists were more moderate. Like there was nothing really salvageable there that would serve American imperial interests in that region. There's nothing there to reform into a more democratic version of itself because it was a personality cult for the most part, and it just meant to be a dictatorship. That was the whole purpose of the ideology, was to be a dictatorship to reach the Hegelian bureaucracy. That's where I think where its origins lie, if I recall correctly. Don't quote me on that.
Let's talk a little bit about the protests that have been going on in Europe. I saw the images of the protest in London, and it was a sea of people. I feel like Europe is becoming less homogenous by the second. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you.
And we're actually studying this in my college diversity course right now, and I'm gonna say it like I said in one of my assignments. The thing about Europe is, normally when we talk about Europe and America, we usually say America needs to take a lesson from Europe. When it comes to immigration, Europe needs to take a lesson from America. They need to actually have a plan to integrate these people. You can't just have endless ethnic enclaves in your country.
You act as if the U.S. has actually had a plan to integrate all the people we've been taking in for the past years. When the truth is we haven't. The U.S. has completely and utterly failed. The U.S. government has completely and utterly failed to integrate the current populations within our own country.
Well,
I disagree
I'm
there.
not saying we have a plan now, but I'm saying-
Can we all settle
wait
down
there, guys,
one at a
wait there,
time,
guys.
please?
I'm not saying we have
So, right.
Frederick.
So, Hungary, right? With that one guy. He also,
Bourbon.
yeah, him. He also kind of has like a strict border policy in Europe. So, you could take some lessons from his Hungary when it comes to border policy. Maybe.
If I may.
Go ahead.
I have a good friend in Hungary, and I got all the info coming in from it's from his side of the story, and it ain't exactly great, even if, as he puts it, when you turn your country into one big stadium.
Yes.
I understand. Yeah, I think I understand the point you're trying to make, and sometimes being culturally homogenous can lead to a backward swing in development. See Nazi Germany. for an example, of the flight of the scientists and whatnot that were essentially kicked out of there. But I will posit that if a nation isn't really cohesive and it's really just a bunch of different nations within nations like we have here in the United States,
Yeah.
that could that basically vote along their own interests instead of the interest of the nation as a whole by and large,
Right.
which can lead to, if there is a war down the line, which, as we said, probably not going to happen, but there could
But you
be
never know.
balkanization down the road if polarization continues to accelerate the way it has.
Oh yeah, there's so many
Yeah,
like
but
subcultures
in the
and
United States-
identities.
But in the United States, it's not like that in Europe, because a lot of different groups from different nations integrate into this one culture, or at least into like a pot of cultures, to create one united culture. So
Is there one united American culture? I would posit no.
Oh
There
God,
is
no.
no, but we are
I'd say
binded
actually-
together in a melting pot of different cultures.
I'd
I
say
would
there
say-
is an American culture actually.
You
but
take
it-
that back, you
No.
filthy Virginian.
No. But like, it's in a weird way, because a friend was talking to me about this on the identification with national symbols, like that represent America. How that's a lot more prevalent in the federal government. There is an American culture, but it's just among the federal bureaucracy, because
Yeah.
they kind of cordon and tear themselves from the rest of society to some extent.
I
And he
would
says
say
that as a
America, once again, America is built on Rome LARP. America has a real why there isn't a unified American culture, like historical traditions and stuff. I would say that there is a unified American culture when it comes to like civic values, national identity, and such. American culture much more affects our civic life than our social life.
I can't even say that that's true, because half the country's moral values are diametrically different to the other side. Look at the abortion debate. Look at the debate and all the social issues. I could not. Go ahead.
But I
So
would still say that it fits into the patchwork of a greater idea of American exceptionalism, and fits into basically the notion of an American civic ideal, rather that it's not diametric to that. It is as a political difference. I mean, while there are political differences, it's not diametrically a cultural difference as a result.
yeah.
Speaking of culture, this upcoming week is Halloween, which if you wanted to get the etymology of a word, Hallow Eve or All Hallows Eve, which is the
pagan
eve
holiday.
of All Saints Day. And just a quick public service announcement. If you are listening, if you are a Catholic in the United States, November 1st, All Saints Day, is a holy day of obligation. All Catholics are required to attend Mass on that day, just as you would for a Sunday. That has been your quick public service announcement. It's really interesting how, and I believe we discussed this on previous episodes of the podcast, of just how sort of medieval Catholic a lot of our Halloween traditions are, like trick-or-treating, for instance, dates back to the medieval period. Carving pumpkins dates back to medieval period. Dressing
didn't have
up in
pumpkins.
costumes goes back to the medieval period. Not necessarily dressing up as a football player, but dressing up as certain things, it goes back to the medieval period. And there are some Christians who claim that Halloween is of its nature pagan and Christians shouldn't celebrate Halloween. I couldn't disagree more. Please feel free to party hard for Halloween.
Yeah, I
Don't
think,
forget to say prayers for the souls in purgatory on All Hallows Day. You can grant them an indulgence. I wanted to also
Yeah.
throw
Oh,
that
yes,
out there. That's
Water
really
Cube.
important.
Yes, that is very important, Water Cube. I am very grateful that you mentioned that, actually. You can. And speaking of indulgences, on the traditional calendar, tomorrow, as we're recording this, is the Feast of Christ the King. That feast was moved in the post-Vatican II calendar to the end of November. And you can, I don't know if you can grant an indulgence on Christ the King, but I know that there's something available based off that. But let's not get into that. We're getting too far into the weeds. I don't want to turn into Charles York, so let's get off of religion. So what is your favorite ghost story?
Wait a minute. I think Cliff was going to say something beforehand.
Yeah, so when you brought up the point that Halloween is kind of pagan, you are technically correct on that one, because if I'm correct, there was a quote from a satanic priest that said, "I am glad that every year parents let their children worship the devil once a year."
Okay, factor in the satanic priests. Like most of the time, they're Nietzscheans who ran out of like ritual to do. They're people who are for the most part bored with their lives. Like, ever read the LaVeyan Satanic Bible? Funniest thing I ever read. Really dumb. Just repackaged Ayn Randism.
It's just dumb.
All right, let's.
But
Okay,
it does make a point there, because Halloween is a pagan holiday of.
No, it's not.
And
No, it's not.
Really, it was created by pagans.
No, it wasn't.
There was traditions around the end of fall in most cultures. Like the Catholic Church just adopted like parts of it, like which is the dates for the most part, into its tradition to help with like conformity to certain cultures. It's where we get the phrase, like not specifically, but Catholicism tends to conform to local cultures. When in Rome, do as the Romans do came from the way how Romans prayed compared to how Frenchmen prayed. Like there's so many different variations among Catholicism that there had to be some contingency to make sure these cultures and different ideas were able to remain unified in one universal church.
Right.
Let's not have the big brawl on whether or not Halloween is pagan, please.
All right, let's
move on to the next topic. So what was it we were going to talk about before I got into
Actually, the next topic that I sort of wanted to bring up was there was a discussion on Royalist Report last week on legitimacy of the British and Spanish crowns, and of course, our friends brought up the Jacobite claim and the Carlist claim to Britain and Spain, respectively.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Jacobite. It's really hard to say, but because King James, I believe the second's daughter was a Jacobite-ish kind of thing before.
No, you're thinking of the illegitimate daughter of Bonnie Prince Charlie, I think.
I think so.
But that's neither here nor there. The question though is, I actually think that there's an argument to be made that should the UK update its succession law to get rid of the anti-Catholic provision, you might as well just put the Jacobite people on the throne at that point, because you're doing away with the very reason that James II got deposed in the first place.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, yes, go. Yeah. But the fact is, it would be very hard to propose between the Protestant population, because the Jacobites are Catholic, obviously, and it wouldn't really.
Oh, no. Back when the Jacobite uprisings were happening, this was seen as a dynastic dispute. There were people in London ready and waiting to crown James the Old Pretender or Bonnie Prince Charlie as the king. They were ready to go as soon as London was either restored or conquered, depending on your point of view.
Honestly, I don't think it'll ever happen in the 21st century just because of how irrelevant the Jacobite line has become. Honestly, and it wouldn't make much of a difference. I mean,
Yeah.
from the aesthetic point of view, it would still be a German on the throne of England and
Yeah.
Great Britain. So you don't even have that whole nativist sentiment that was really strong with the Jacobite movement. Because the Jacobites are no longer ethnically British.
Yeah,
Well,
they're either.
if I can play the Charles York advocate here and basically substitute myself in his place, it doesn't matter what nationality he is. If he is the rightful king, he's the rightful king, period.
Not after the British people.
All right, so let's move on to discussing the Carlist claim to Spain. That is,
Now, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Frederick was going to say something.
Yeah, so the Carlists, they don't believe that. They believed in the male line of succession, not the female line of succession, which was, I believe, what was that royal house?
It was.
That
It's all.
the
right.
They're all Bourbons. The problem came with Queen Isabella.
Yeah, Queen Isabella.
Also,
Honestly,
I'm just gonna say it right now. The Carlist line is dead and gone, and the only person who is the best claimant to that one would be whoever is the quote unquote legitimist pretender to the French throne. He is the best possible claimant to the Carlist line. Other than that, it is the current king of Spain. He is the king. He is the
which
best
is why
Carlist.
I always thought the whole point behind Carlism is honestly kind of moot or even pointless, because the Spanish monarchy was restored. It's the Bourbons. Are they really going to throw a massive fit because it's not the right Bourbon?
Yeah, especially since now they want to put the House of Bourbon Parma on the throne instead, because that's the current Carlos pretender is a member of the House of Bourbon Parma.
Which, if I remember correctly, as you
They
just said,
can't
is
even decide on what royal family they want.
and if
No, that's the French.
oh yeah. Well, the French
That's
also have to
French.
decide between Napoleon too, for some odd
Well, the
reason.
French, there are three claimants:
Yeah.
the Bonapartists, the Legitimists, and the Orleanists.
Which,
Yes.
while I support the Legitimists, I have a soft spot in my heart for the Bonapartists because, frankly, given the modern Republican nature of France, I feel like they have a more
Why
culturally relevant thing.
why the legitimists?
Why
Because
not the
they're the one-
Orleanists?
Yeah, if anything, the
for the same
Orleanists have the better
basis that,
claim.
Louis the 16th was unlawfully deposed, so it should obviously be his legal
That's true.
successor.
And his legal successor is
that-
the Orleanists.
I thought it was the Legitimists.
No, the Legitimist is a Spanish line. In fact, the last Legitimist basically said because he died heirless, and he was the last one of his line of descendants from Louis the 14th. There was no more male descendants from Louis the 14th, and he gave up his claim to his cousin, who was the head of the Orleanists faction. And they actually became, I don't know, was it the United House or something along those lines for a good long while.
So the Orleanists and the Legitimists are actually the same. In a way.
It's sort of depends.
The Legitimist cause has seen an uptick because people see the Orleanists as being too liberal.
Which is funny when you look at the current head of the House of Orleans, because he's not a liberal.
Anyway, let us move on to discussing other claims. I was just in Italy, so let's talk about the family feud in Italy.
You mean between the House of Savoy and what's that other house?
They're cousins. It's the same house.
Right.
It's one of them is the direct descendants from the last king of Italy, King Umberto II. The other ones are descendants from the Dukes of Aosta.
Yeah,
the difference between the two comes from the fact that the current the heir to King Umberto married a commoner.
Yeah, what I was trying to remember was the name of the cadet branch, and thank you for reminding me of Aosta. Honestly, I'm gonna take a side in this. I stand with Aosta because they're the only ones maintaining dignity, whereas basically the current pretender from the main line of Savoy is basically using his supposed crown to make his daughter an influencer.
What a time we live in.
Really
the
is.
time we live in, indeed. Yes, sir. Let's talk about.
I'm wondering how the House of Hohenzollern is doing.
George doesn't want the throne. George has stated outright that he could care less whether or not he becomes Kaiser.
All right, so let us talk about.
All right, you were saying, Vic?
I was saying that what drives legitimacy? Like, what makes a monarch legitimate at the end of the day?
Consent of the people.
It depends.
It might be my own leftist belief. Sorry, Frederick.
Like, how many years has the family been around? Does the family still hold on to claims? But
I mean, I would say this varies based off of culture, context, and other factors. Like, of course, like what Frederick said, the claim Mammoth is vowed to, saying consent of the people. And it just depends on the society that the monarchy exists in. I mean, there's probably not one answer to this because different monarchies will legitimize themselves in different ways. Like the House of Yamato legitimizing themselves because of their unbroken paternal line since the founding of Japan.
My belief, mostly with legitimacy, that it derives over the realistic control that someone who would be a monarch has over institutions. Like, Bonaparte is a legitimate monarch in my mind because he seized control of the state apparatus during the Republican era and established a monarchy after. Same with King Zog of Albania. Both of these guys took a system and repurposed it to their own ends. It's also why I believe that like America could become a monarchy, but it might not resemble the monarchies that we're used to because of how that institutional control may play out.
Yeah, like it could be either an elective monarch or it could be something else. entirely.
And I think that is a discussion that we can have. I think that's a discussion that can be had for another day. So, just to wrap
Yeah.
things up.
So
No,
that
wait a
will
minute. We ain't
possibly
wrapping
be.
it up yet. We still have to
We
talk
haven't.
about Halloween stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
Halloween stuff. What is your favorite
Yes.
ghost? Let's do a.
Or
Let's
horror
do.
movie. Horror movie.
Wait. Frederick, go ahead.
Horror movies. Let's talk about horror movies, my friends. I'm not
I
gonna
was
lie,
going to
the
do a.
slasher
I was.
films of the 80s and 70s, or I think 90s maybe, were okay, or were good, like good.
Um, with like, just covering horror in general, one of my favorite films is Begotten. Less horror, more something. It is horror. It's horrifying, but it's also a great expression of almost pagan belief and ritual. And by pagan, I more mean like summarizing Proto-Indo-European beliefs and like taking from those myths that we were able to reconstruct, and it creates something that's absolutely terrifying in an artistic way and even in a spiritual way. On like, you can understand that, like, oh, this is how people used to just perceive how reality was created before Christianity, before monotheism was even a formalized and established belief system outside of the Jews.
I've never heard of the movie Begotten. Care to explain it?
I don't think I. Let me just grab out the Wikipedia description. But how it goes from memory is that it starts with a god disemboweling himself, and that represents creation because like Mother Earth thing comes in, and I'm not sure if all this is appropriate for the podcast. I'm realizing, right? As I was about to say,
Most horror films are.
yeah, most horror films are. Ghost stories was probably the best thing to go with because ghost
Yeah.
stories can be scary, but also avoid
We
a
can-
lot of it.
So let's go around. Let's go around here, and say what everyone's favorite ghost story is. We will start with Frederick.
Oh no. I don't really have much ghost stories really, but I do know some. I don't really have too much ghost stories really to
That's
go
okay.
around.
Let's go to Watercube.
What is this, reciting them or just favorite ones?
Your
Either
favorite.
or.
There's this one story. I'm now trying to remember its name for the life of me. Actually, I'll just name another one. The Stairs in the Doorway. It's an online. It was one of like the earlier creepypastas that came out, but it became one of my favorite stories because it just touched on the horror of being in like an office building or a school alone and how eerie that can feel. And then it builds onto that with like horror elements. The plot line is like him just kind of wandering throughout this building, eventually finding like this guy, security guard, wandering through this building, eventually finding something, releasing something. It's fairly generic plot wise, but how the writer wrote it has a level of beauty.
That sounds like a very wonderful ghost story. Will.
Okay,
So-
I got one.
Oh,
Okay,
go ahead,
I was
Frederick.
thinking a little bit
Frederick-
hard about it, and it comes from a story in Mexico. So, I forgot what her name is called. So
It doesn't
it's
matter.
about
Just say the
the
story.
it's about
Say what
this.
it's about.
Huh?
Just say what it's about. You don't have to give the name.
So it's about this native woman who got married to like a conquistador in the past, and the conquistador left her with her kids and to be with another woman. And so the native woman who was in love with the conquistador killed her kids. And since she was Catholic, because she converted to Catholicism, she killed herself along with her kids, and God punished her by making her go around the earth to search for her kids' souls. And you can find her near like streams and rivers, that kind of stuff. It kind of freaky. Like,
Sounds it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Will, go ahead.
So, I had a couple I could possibly choose from. For those of you who don't know, most of you probably do, I am from Ohio. Now, when most people think of ghost towns, they tend to think of places out west, but we actually have quite a few of these places in Ohio, back from very, very early in America's industrialization. Most of them were old iron mining towns. And one of them was a place called Moonville. Now,
I think
Moonville...
I may have heard that town
Now,
before.
yes, I just posted a picture of the tunnel. The only thing left of the town is the tunnel. Now, way deep south in the Hocking Hills of Ohio, near, I think, the modern town of MacArthur, somewhere out near Athens, Ohio, wedged in between Wayne National Forest and Zaleski State Park, sits this tunnel, and it is the only thing left of this little iron mining town that was out in the middle of nowhere. You can access it from the abandoned rail line, because the rail line is still there. Of course, the tracks are gone. It's just a gravel path, but you can still access it. But anyway, the ghost story goes that one day a typhoid epidemic happened in the town. As a result, the railroad quarantined the town, and trains were no longer allowed to stop there to supply the town. As a result, typhoid epidemic rapidly became a food shortage. So a plan was devised for the conductor, the guy in charge of managing the rail lines in that area, to go out with a lantern and signal the train to stop outside the boundaries of the town so that they could get the supplies they needed without violating the quarantine.
Right.
The tragedy goes that either because he overslept or overdrank, or because the train came early, when the conductor, when the switch operator, whoever he was, went to stop the train, he was killed in the tunnel because he could not make it to the other side of the tunnel before the train entered it. This is believed to be based off of a real story, where a bridge version of a real story, where a rail operator fell off near the town or inside a tunnel and was sucked under the wheel. But the legend goes that if you're there late at night, or if you're there at certain times, you could still see the train conductor holding his lantern trying to stop the train. And on occasion, people have also reported a phantom train as well.
Oof, that's
All
creepy.
right.
Does anyone
only-
else have any good stories? So old man, do you have any?
I got a few. But the important thing is that we're just mentioning our favorite one. So I will say, let's see here. My favorite ghost story has to be The Finger. It's a Jewish folktale. An old one.
Right.
Well,
Care
go
to
ahead.
elaborate on it?
Oh, all right then. All right, let's see how it goes. So long ago, I don't know how long ago, but quite long ago, three boys were walking in the woods. One of them being, I forget his name, but he was the eldest of the boys, and next day he was going to get married. It was going to be a great thing. So, him and his friends were just going for the woods, just to relax. It was dark of night, if I recall. Anyway, eventually, as they go walking for the woods, they see a root sticking out of the ground, and one of them says, "Hey, it kind of looks like a finger. We should put a ring on it as a joke." They're laughing and joking, and the eldest one, the one who's getting married, says, "Listen, I'll do it. I'm getting married tomorrow. Might as well get the practice in." And so, as she goes He goes to put the ring on the finger, and, well, a most horrifying thing happens. And you know what happens? Well,
The
it
guy
turns
gets
out...
married to a ghost.
No, he doesn't get married to a ghost, but it does reveal that the root wasn't a root, but instead a finger to a corpse. Which, lucky for, well, the situation is, well, a dead woman. And, well, she gets all excited and she says in the most horrific voice, "My betrothed, you've come to me." Well, she says it in Hebrew. I'm not going to say Hebrew for you weirdos anyway. And while they all three start running off into the woods as she calls out for them. And the next day the wedding happens. It's a happy affair. The man's about to get married until, well, who shows up but this horrifying corpse? Everyone runs away, including the bride, except, of course, the man who put the ring on his finger and the rabbi. And let's see here, how does it go? The rabbi asks, what the hell are you doing? Why are you still awake, from your slumber and whatnot? And, the corpse says, well, what does he say? I've come for my husband, and
Oh.
I'm afraid my brain is sort of getting foggy at the moment. The moral of the story, you ever see, what was that Tim Burton film, The Corpse Bride?
I was going to say, is this what The Corpse Bride is based off of?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
It's like that.
From...
No, it's like that in the first half, but basically the rabbi, the story ends the rabbi saying, listen, because both families agreed to your original wedding, that means that you can't marry the new guy. She cries out in distraught and just dies on the ground, and everyone just reburies her.
That
That's sad.
sounds like a very, very good story. And I think that is the perfect way to end it.
This episode.
And
Or-
so, if you would like to join us live for Monarchist Minute, you can do so every Saturday night. Saturday nights are all right for fighting. Saturday nights are now also all right for podcast listening. You can listen to Monarchist Minute Saturday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, in our Discord server link in the description. And if you want to follow us on all of our social medias, you can do so. Links to those will also be in the description. So, our erstwhile chaplain, you can lead us in prayer.
Name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Heavenly Father, we pray for all those souls of those who have died before us. We pray for them to rest in eternal peace and bliss. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so until next week, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America.
And we hope we can see you next week.
Stop the recording. It's time to stop the recording.
Is the recording still
Time
hot?
to stop the recording.
I'm afraid this is not how it ends. It keeps going. That's the true horror of the